Neman, the producer of the Imagine Science Film Festival. We have 4 of the filmmakers here in the audience I'm about to introduce you to. But before that, I just want to remind everyone that we have the VR directors of Tree, who will be giving a gallery talk immediately following this event. At 6 p.m., we have a careers panel led by Pakanam Amer, the chief editor of Nature Middle East. And then 7:30 is our closing night screening of Marjorie Prime, and you'll also hear from our jurors about the awards and about a little bit of a commentary on that movie. But I'd like to introduce Professor Wendy Benars, who heads the Film and New Media Department here at NYUAD. She'll be talking with Noah Hutton, who did Blue Brain Year 8, Giulia Grossmann and Cosmic Neman, who created Mars Society, and Alexis Gambis, who created Ensign.
Don't leave. You know, it's so interesting to watch a program like that. These films all in concession, because it takes you on a journey. You begin feeling very small, like you on a molecular level, and then you feel you're expanded into the universe, and you feel like humanity has so much potential, and then you're mad at humanity for all the bad things that it does. So the programming is quite beautiful. Here, I'll sit on the end. How's that? Have a seat. So I'm going to start with a few questions, and then we can open it up to the audience. Let's start with the Mars Society. That was quite an experience to sit there and listen to this and watch these images together, and I was so curious as I was experiencing it, how it changes every time, how you read the energy in the room, and how we would experience it differently if we were to watch it in a different screening at a different time.
It's a good question, I think, because actually most of the special effects in the film are made with light shows. It's like an old way. It's been used in the 70s for rock shows, like psychedelic rock shows, where it's with oil and you liquid and you heat it up and it changes the colors and you have all these bubbles. And we usually do it live also with the light shows, and so he projects the colors on the screen, and it changes every time. It can be the same, so it's even more crazy when François is here doing it. But
actually, normally François have got like 5 projectors, and he screened this liquid, but it changes each time we show it. And I am doing the mixing images in live also. But this one was the film without the light show.
I see.
But for the music, I mean, I use only mostly analog instruments, which means like every sound I have to create the sound every time, so it's never the same. And so I don't use computers, because like if you use a computer, it's going to like digital sounds are exactly the same, and so this is what I like in music myself, and so. Obviously, every time I play it, it's different.
So we had a very unique experience today.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the Blue Brain, is that right? I was so interested as well, because the brain is a vast subject, and there are so many ways that you could approach this documentary. And it really became about the journey to understand the brain, and then it became about the filmmaker's journey to get the film made as well. So if you could talk about just your point of entry into this work, what you maybe had hoped for in the beginning, and what you found as you went along in the process.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to say, though, that it's not done. So like what I screen here is the year 8. Like this is what's happened year 8.
Right.
With footage from the previous years too. But this is all building towards a 10-year film that will be all re-edited into a feature-length documentary. So that being said, it happened that this year I got stood up by my main subject. So at the end, it did become about that. Maybe it would have been about what he had to say, but but it became about me waiting for him in his office. So I just want to be flexible as I go on, and also something that has changed since I started. I started the project a little more wide-eyed and just awestruck by the endeavor to simulate a human brain in 10 years. And as the project fell apart in some ways, and then kind of recoalesced, and now they're on a new timeline, and all this stuff has been reset since the original promise, that I've had to kind of update what I'm doing, and I lost some interest, honestly, in making the film, and I've come back now with new energy because I have realized that it is a little bit more maybe about the journey now, and that maybe I have more of a voice in the film, and to be a little more critical of the endeavor or of the overselling or whatever direction it's going to be. And maybe they will produce something interesting by 2020. You have to be open to that too. Sure.
Well, thank you. That takes a lot of courage to stay on track with that.
Well, you say you work on something for a number of years. You kind of have to keep going. I don't know. I don't feel like it. It's like now inevitable that I have to do it. I don't know.
Right. And the oryx, the Ansan. I was really interested as a filmmaker and also a scientist. I forget the line that you said, but you talked about film as being evidence. And your approach to filmmaking, the docu-fiction, can you talk about that a little bit? And can film be as evidence?
Yeah, I oftentimes feel that the scientific documentary has such potential for truthfulness that I use that to my favor when I create my fictions, because I can really use that stereotype of the scientist talking to the camera as a way to actually inject fiction. So. And part of making a film, a nature film or a film about an animal, I always do interviews anyway with the scientists. These are scientists at Environment Abu Dhabi Agency that are working to protect the Arabian oryx. So there's always a part of research and interviews. And then, at some point when we get comfortable, I start asking them to say a few things. And there's a few lines about the genetically modified oryx that has this language gene. But all of this is also based on research that's happening now in our kind of desire to make animals more like us. And there was an article in the Times about these mice that had this gene that was involved with language called FOXP2, and they were trying to listen to the mice to see if it squealed. It had a different sound. And that was the inspiration for making this film. So that's how I go about it. And then the last line in the film was meant actually to make people think, that he says this film is a testament to the fact that I can communicate with the oryx. So I thought that was an interesting way to do that. I've said that it's fake, but a lot of people have come up to me and have believed that this is a real oryx. So, yeah.
Did you have any experiences when you were with the oryx where you felt they were talking to you?
Yeah, I think, as the last film with the parrots, I think all animals communicate, and what we think about language and communication is also very arbitrary, whether it's learned behavior. And so, to a certain extent, I think, of course, oryx communicate with each other, and it was an amazing experience to be with them. And also that we shot part of it at Elaine Zoo. And there was this whole scene about how you speak to the oryx and the call, which I thought was interesting, about how the humans are trying to call the oryx and him doing that. And then it was, trying to use the animal as kind of a conduit to speak about us, and about how, if they could have the voice, what would they say about humanity?
Right.
And how we're treating them. So.
Right. They might get together with the parrots and have something to say. So are there any questions from the audience?
Hi. Oh, wow, that was really loud. Thank you so much for bringing all of your film work to Abu Dhabi for us to experience. Each of your films had a really different voice, and I was curious if each of you could talk a little bit about the editing and the pacing that you found in your film work and the way that you approach that aspect of these pieces of work.
Do you want to start?
Okay. Okay. Well, thanks for the question. I feel like I don't know if this is a good represent. This is very snappy. I'm trying to show a lot in 15 minutes. I don't know that this is like a voice that I'd want for the. I want the film to rest a little bit more in the characters and eventually. So, but for this, I guess I still feel like over time I've evolved to try to put a little more humor in there. I'm trying to sort of lighten the mood a little bit. The brain, I can get so heavy, but I'm trying to these people are real characters and they have interesting human dimensions too. So I'm trying to let that breathe a little bit. But I'm also trying to put in my voice a little bit to pop the bubble a little bit of seriousness once in a while.
Do you want me to go first?
I don't mind.
Okay. I guess the way I edit it is I first do the interviews. A lot of the interviews are also partly improvised. So when I worked with Shakbout, part of those stories are real stories about him, and he actually stutters. And then I use that as kind of the thread to think about the images on top of that. And then the actress Reem, she told me that she was a poet, and so she created this poem that is the last scene that she actually recites. And so I have all of this audio, and then within that I start thinking about the images, and so it usually starts with these interviews because I never really know what they're going to say, and I also surprise them on camera. So sometimes I ask these. I don't tell them beforehand what I'm going to tell them, and so I don't really know what the film is going to be until I do that. So, yeah.
And for me, the film starts with the meeting of with Alain Souchier, which is the narrator of the movie and also the actor. Actually, it's not an actor at all. It's the engineer of the rocket Ariane ship. And he worked for the Mars Society, and he do some reenactment, or also he role player. I mean, they put us in a situation to go to Mars, and in order to develop the research, also they go to the desert in the Utah and stay there for 6 months, or even in the Arctic desert, and I wanted to try to be in this head like a dreamy journey into the journey to Mars. So this is quite like a fiction into his head.
Thank you. Anybody else with a question? Right there.
Curious to know when you see your films curated within a context of these shorts, either this one or other ones, what you learn about your own film as it's put together in this collection.
Okay. Okay. Well, I guess I learn. I think you inevitably feel your voice sometimes stronger in comparison to other voices, or you feel the edges of what you thought was such a clear choice for you when you were editing something, pacing wise, or just the tone of something. when it's up against a number of other films, and you have glimmers of other choices you could have made along the way, it's really helpful because I think when you get back in the editing room, you kind of like feel this multiplicity of voices around, like that you carry with you, and you maybe can get outside of your own zone a little bit. Really helps. I think it expands the possibilities to feel your own work like rubbing up against other work.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I want to congratulate Nate, who's sitting in front here, who the curation of films. I think it's interesting because you start trying to find the connections between the films. So it makes you try to see, okay, why is this film connected to the next one? And I think a lot about that. The squid film, I was like, oh, we see the brain at the end. And so I think the order is interesting. But the other aspect is that you start, in addition to what Noah's saying, you start seeing your own film in the other ones. Especially if it plays, at the beginning, or even if you start kind of projecting your own film into other story plots. And it becomes almost like an experience. And so yeah, I don't know if I'm coherent or eloquent, but you start kind of seeing aspects. I was thinking about the parrots and the oryx and how they should team together as well.
The films definitely speak to each other. And in terms of projection, even as an audience member, you start to project yourself into the film. What would it be like to go to Mars? What would it be like to be able to speak to an animal? If that squid looks like a human, in the same way, maybe we project our feelings and thoughts onto animals, or maybe not. But there's this total immersion when you're experiencing these films together.
Yeah, they're all different as well, in the sense that you have animation, you have data visualization, you have fiction, you have documentary. So it's also playing with like the form. It's how do you talk about animal communication through just images, just documentary, just animation. And so it's and the program is ultimately about animal communication. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to discover your movie, actually. And for me, it's good to see my movie in between the other movie, because it means that it's finished. Because every time I want to edit something else, yes. But I can see the link with the confrontation of the meaning of the human condition. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I can just say that all these movies are about trying to communicate to something that I don't really know, like could be space or aliens or animals. So I think it was a good idea. Thank you.
On that note, you have a question? You have a question, Laura?
I first saw Laura and Calcevilla's film about the parrots at the Sharjah Biennial, and I was thinking about how being in that space, the way they had it set up was pitch black, and it was a little bit of a different experience because you're focused so much on sound and voice, and there's multiple projectors, and you're really sort of in an environment. And thinking about what you were saying, doing the oil and the effects right there, and maybe 5 projectors, and I was curious if there's an ideal way that you would like when you're making a film, is there an ideal way that you want the audience to have a relationship with it? Like, do you imagine it being in gallery spaces or in big theaters or music spaces? Like, how are these living in that way? Maybe it's different for each film you make.
Actually, Mark Society can be shown also in the gallery, and it's a link between the music, the film, and the light. So we used to screen it in museum, but also like in film festival and also like in music festival actually. So it's an hybrid. There's some hybrid possibility for it.
Yeah, I think that showing it in different settings actually gives it, the same way as curating a film program. It gives it a totally different meaning. And so if you're showing, I've made a few films that deal with kind of mockumentaries. I made one on mangroves, about a monster that lives in the mangroves, and I showed it actually in a gallery setting, and how people relate to the fact that it's truthful or accurate changes completely when you're in a gallery. So I love the fact that you can show it, the space really, and then whether you show it in a cinema or in a museum or in a cabaret, in a bar, I mean, it has a totally different kind of reaction that people have. So yeah, I love to play around with that aspect.
Yeah, I don't have much experience. I've never really shown work in a gallery space. I'm pretty much just done like film festival screenings, theatrical thing, and then some sort of digital experience. But I guess all I have to say about that is that I just hate the idea of always sending a link to something to somebody and imagining them watching it like on their laptop or something, like while they're doing other things. I mean, that's fine. I do that too. Yeah, but it's like to be expected these days. But that's like a total nightmare. And in fact, this is like heaven to be in a room with people watching it, because you learn so much, so much more about. And I'm so lucky to be able to show this like ongoing project. Alexis been so generous in the festival to let me show this kind of like work in progress thing over the years, and I've just learned like so much information, just not even hearing what's people's reaction to something, just literally feeling the feeling of being in a room with people while you watch something. It totally changes your relationship with your work. So I hope that continues. I worry sometimes these days about the atomization of the viewing experience.
That's so true.
Hi. Congratulations, all of you, for the great job, first. Second, I would like to ask a question regarding being a director. What is your favorite part of creating the whole film?
Me, I prefer to edited because for me it's depend of there's different way to do a film, but I directed my movie in making the editing also. It's the part when I manipulate the images, and I really like to do that.
For me, editing is like excruciating, but there's like a delight there. Yes, I understand. But for me, my favorite part of it is shooting. I guess in documentary it would be called like B-roll, just being with a camera in a space and capturing the life going on. When there's no like pressure to put it together in any way yet, you're just literally there capturing the raw data that later you'll have to deal with. And then, but once in a while, like something happens amazing, it comes across your frame and you see it, and it's those little moments that are like totally pure because they haven't been manipulated yet by editing that I love. And it's actually more like an anthropological film, if that kind of filmmaking when you're just directly with your subject, and I like that part the best.
Yeah, also Jenna, who helped me on the film, the one who asked the question, helped me with the editing and translation. I think for me, making films in this region has allowed, you oftentimes think about the camera being like a hindrance to get access, but it's allowed me to get into places that I would have never been able to get to and speak to, either local populations. And so for me, it's been like this process of discovery. Every time I make a film here, I'm like, oh, I'm interested in the Oryx. And the film is almost like an excuse to learn more about what's happening. And everybody, everybody's very receptive to talking about, their region and all these things. What I enjoy the most is working with actors and non-actors and explaining to them what I'm trying to do, because, as I said before, like, there's an immediate way in which they're going to talk, especially if they're scientists, and just playing around with that and see who doesn't want to do it, who does want to do it. And whatever reaction I get is good on camera. So, as Noah showed, even a no-show is good. And I love filming animals. So, all my films deal with, there's always an animal as the main character. So, right now it's butterflies, my next one, but yeah.
That's beautiful. Everyone has a very different answer. So thank you so much for taking us on this journey and sharing your beautiful work. It really was amazing. We wish you all the best, and thanks for coming.
Thank you. And there's a talk at 4. If anybody wants to go, the creators of Tree are going to talk about their VR experience. It'll be the last gallery talk, and then a career panel at 6. Yeah.